Good morning. Welcome to the Watching Humans podcast. I'm your host, Skylar Thomas. This is part 3 of examining the phrase stewards of the land. And today's going to be kind of unique. I have a special perspective on this because I've been living in urban sprawl recently. And, ranching is supposed to protect us from urban sprawl, supposedly. That is used to justify their presence, and it's even used to justify providing them millions of dollars more in quote unquote conservation easements from organizations such as the Marin Agricultural Land Trust and those sorts of things. So here, once again, we have ranchers, farmers being presented as saviors of the wild, of nature, of open space, because if it wasn't for them, everything would get developed. And we would just have skyscrapers and malls and apartment complexes and whatever. Okay, so got to come at this from a lot of different angles. So let's break it up into categories, and then you can skip. I'll put these different chapters/categories down in the description, and you can jump down to whichever one you want to tune into or listen to the whole thing. Here's how I'm going to break it down. Number one, why do we have to live under constant threat of potential development? If we got saved and we could say thank you and then move on, that'd be one thing. But the threat never goes away. Every single year it's, hey, you better give us money. You better sing our praises or we're going to sell. We're going to let this land get developed. We'll go back to that one. Development. My perspective living out here, I have seen that agricultural land is the step right before land gets developed. It's basically preparing land for development. I will explain what I mean when we come back to that. Next is the comparing the lesser of two evils as an argument for the lesser evil actually being good. And someone commented on my Shame of Point Reyes film on YouTube. If you want to see something shameful, look at that giant city, San Francisco, down south. This makes me think about how society just likes to point at other things. Point Reyes National Seashore is supposed to be a model for doing things right, and it's supposed to be a great place for wildlife and biodiversity. And exposing the truth of Point Reyes has been shocking. And all people can say, pro ranchers say, is, well, look at the city of San Francisco, one of the largest cities, and say, you don't want it to be that, do you? Like, really? You got to feel better about yourself, about how poorly you're treating the land in Point Reyes, that you have to point at a major city and say, hey, look, that's what it could be. That's what it could be. So you're patting yourself on the back, not because you're doing something great, but because things could always be worse. Now, this one gets really complicated, so we might as well launch from here since I'm talking about it. It turns out studies are showing that dairies actually produce more waste than major cities do. I know cities can be pretty gross, and I don't blame anyone for thinking, oh my God, imagine all the sewage, etc. Well, yeah, but those are like human beings eating and pooping on a, somewhat sane level, whereas dairies, you have massive 1,500-pound commodity animals that have basically been turned into eating and pooping machines. It's just a never-ending process of consume, get as big as you can, as quickly as you can, so that we can slaughter you for flesh as quickly as we can. And in the meantime, those animals have been pooping out everything that they've been consuming. and the amount of waste is pretty mind-boggling. And I know the pro ranching side is going to talk about, hey, manure's natural, it's good. Okay, no, not when it's just a river of manure to where your output matches or exceeds that of major cities. Next, have you taken a look at ranch land? Turns out, and actually, John Muir wrote this in one of his books. I read this quote recently. He said that urban development cities are going to end up being a last refuge for some wildlife. What? What? What a crazy thing to say. But I look around at the agricultural land that hasn't been developed yet here where I live, and it's just desolation. So, by comparison, if I look in my very modest yard where I have made an effort to make it friendly for some creatures, I have way more plant life, way more diversity. And I have a pathetic yard. Imagine people with significant yards that actually do anything good, like plant a native plant or have trees, or at least didn't chop down the trees. Because if you look at ranch land, it's a massive expanse of chopped down trees and mowed down hedges and brush that animals used to live in. And you're saying that this is what's friendly for wildlife? I mean, the fact that we can even have a conversation, you don't have to agree with it, you don't have to say, well, cities are better, but the fact that you can even present a decent argument showing that you've got more life, whether we're talking about plants or animals, in urban development than you can find out on farms and ranch land. Hello, there's a wake-up call. So that kind of leads nicely to the next part, and that is the, well, preparation of land to be developed. I've been taking a bunch of photographs of different plots of land, and I've been asking people, what do you think you're looking at? Do you think you're looking at farmland, or do you think you're looking at a urban development site? And people are getting it wrong. People are guessing it wrong. And I don't blame them for guessing it wrong, because you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference. I mean, I've got myself thinking, what are they doing here? Are they rototilling this? Are they getting it ready for some row crops? What are they doing? Nope. Commercial space, commercial development. It looks exactly like farmland and ranch land. Shockingly enough, it reminds me of Point Reyes National Seashore and the vast expanse of desolation that is out there. Out here where I live, urban sprawl is taking place at a shocking rate. And it's flat, so I guess that makes it easy to develop, but it's really nasty out here. And I've used my drone. I fly up above the city. You get to the outskirts, and I used to be a big jogger until this place just depressed me to where I don't even want to go and see all the nature that's being destroyed anymore. And everything surrounding development is old agricultural land. And it's just land that's been hammered to shit. It's just been used for as much as they can use it for. Kind of like a dairy cow. Keep pumping out babies, we'll keep stealing your milk until you can't stand anymore, and then we'll send you to the slaughterhouse. That's what farmers and ranchers do to land. That's what they do to habitat. And when it's finally spent, when it can finally produce no more, they sell it to developers. Ladies and gentlemen, let me repeat that. When ranchers and farmers are finished raping the land, they get another payout by selling to development companies. Have you ever wondered why so many things are named with the word ranch in it? Start paying attention. Your shopping centers have the word ranch in it. Crocker Ranch. Apartment complexes have the word ranch in it. Around here, a big one is Fitiment Ranch. Streets, roads named after ranches. Everybody gets things named after them. So these farmers and ranchers made it pretty easy for me to do the research on this because they wanted their name plastered on everything. So I know exactly who owned the land and who sold to the developers. And it's these families. This is worth a whole movie in itself because I started researching these families and their long legacies of basically owning gigantic amounts of California, working it. That's the nice phrase that we use, working land, where people working the land to make it productive, which means raping it, killing everything that was naturally there and building levees and redirecting natural water flow so that all the wildlife die, but your crops and your commodity animals now have access to that stuff. We'll get to the wildlife thing in a different episode. For now, I just want to focus on the fact that the people who are responsible for development are farmers and ranchers. Well, that's not fair. Maybe you're arguing, that's not fair. How dare you say that? You know, that's their right. It's their right to sell. What, are you telling me that you wouldn't sell your land if someone was offering it to you? Well, I would say that you don't get to call me a savior or a steward if after using that land decade after decade, maybe even centuries, depending on how far back we go, that at the end of all of that, at the end of profiteering at the expense of the planet, you then sell to the bad guy? You know, I'd like to think that they made enough money over that period of time that they could afford to sell to a conservation group, because there are a lot of conservation and preservation groups out there that want to buy this land and restore it. They actually are trying to do something that a steward of the land should be doing. Someone with the title steward of the land should be doing. Restoring, rewilding, trying to bring back an inkling of the healthy ecosystems that once were here before agriculture destroyed them. And you know what? They still could get a payout. These ranchers could still get a payout by selling to these conservation groups, but it's not as big of a payout as development companies can offer. So what you've got here are people that raped the land, made a lot of money off of it for a very long time, and at the end of that, instead of doing something good or taking a smaller paycheck in addition to all the money they already made, they go for the maximum and they sell to development. The reason that agricultural land gets developed is because the agricultural owners sold to developers. There's no one else to blame. Somehow the public has been convinced that it's their fault. It's our fault because we didn't keep giving these people millions of dollars every year and supporting them with our tax dollars. Yes, we are the bad guys. We are the bad guys because it was us who sold the land by not continuing to just hold these people up on our shoulders. Oh, man. We're talking about millionaires. We're talking about people who have so much money and so much land, and then they sell off a piece of it and sell to a developer instead of doing the right thing. And they get to name it after themselves as if they did something great. You know, it's not like they cured a disease or brought an animal back from the brink of extinction or anything inspiring like that. Nope. You sold to a development company that paved it and put in a mall, and that mall now bears the family ranch name. Good for you, stewards of the land. How wonderful you are. You not buying it? You think any of this is made up? Tell me who got here first. Tell me who got here first. Tell me about the early Europeans, the Spaniards, the ranchos, the missionaries. Well, all of that equated to agriculture, claiming land, using it for their leather businesses or their beef businesses. It was homesteading. It was land grabbing. Back then, you could get land for cheap. In fact, you were encouraged to take that land because they wanted expansion. So we're talking about people who accessed wonderful, biodiverse California land in the early days at a steal of a price, if they paid anything at all, then got water rights to that land to use all the water and redirect the water for their agricultural commodities, until finally what was beautiful and diverse and wonderful and flourishing, whether we're talking about the marshlands, the floodplains, or if we're talking about forests that were chopped down, all of this wonderful California biodiversity was converted into agriculture. And when the land finally, decades later, says, we can't take it anymore, you have just abused us too much and there isn't any water left to give, then they sell. And they sell to the developers. And this is who you call stewards of the land. I don't think we should be giving ranchers and farmers tax dollars. I think they should be paying reparations for all the damage they've done to the planet. I mean, when I'm reviewing the drone footage and it's a no-brainer, like it's clearly obvious that the agricultural land is uglier and more desolate than the city, that tells you a lot. I'm not a fan of the city. I'm not a fan of urban development. I'm just saying you need to take pause and think about what you're praising when agricultural land that's being called an opportunity for wildlife to exist, and that they're actually providing habitat for wildlife by the very presence of these ranches, and it looks like complete desolation compared to the urban sprawl. That's a wake-up call. So still to come in future episodes, there are the arguments of, hey, we're providing for the wildlife, which I just kind of gave a teaser on. And the other one, of course, is food. Food, food, food. We can't give up these farms and ranches because we've got to eat, right? Stay tuned. In the case of Point Reyes National Seashore, this argument, and yes, people still say this argument that the land will be developed if the ranchers leave is just ludicrous and shows how little these people even know about the situation when they're so gung-ho to defend pro-ranching that they haven't even considered the fact that this isn't private land in threat of being sold to the highest bidder. It's already owned. It was already purchased. The government, you the taxpayer, the people own that land. Whatever's done with it after that, the fault of the Department of the Interior and the National Park Service. If our Park Service system deteriorates to the point that they start doing things like developing in national parks, well, we're pretty screwed, aren't we? But ranchers aren't what's going to prevent that from happening. You understand that the legislation and all the surrounding historical documents regarding the creation of Point Reyes National Seashore say that it was created to protect it from development. So it was accomplished. The goal was accomplished. It was purchased and protected by becoming a national seashore. And yet here we are still today saying, oh my God, if the ranchers go away, it might get developed. In the meantime, the ranchers are actually petitioning to put in more buildings. They're the ones who are trying to develop on it. And if we'd gotten rid of them in the first place, as was supposed to happen by purchasing it and turning it into a national seashore, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. All that area, I would like to think, would have been restored by now and be featuring natural plants and animals.